Scott, do you know if there are people that are participating by YouTube? Do you have any indication there?
Well, I mean, Lucy did the last time.
Right. But would you know that somebody was on?
The mayor looks the most comfortable of anybody.
Yeah,
Dummies.
I'm not hiding the fact that I'm sitting on my very comfortable living room couch.
It's not lost on the rest of us.
Jack, our last one's. Oh my
Was that-
goodness.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I just heard you. Yeah, I just heard you, Bob.
You were getting feedback. You were getting feedback from YouTube because I had the volume on. So it was a 20-second delay. So we were repeating ourselves.
Oh,
We had 17 views on the last meeting. So because I had the volume on. So it was a 20-second
oh yeah, I can hear it.
Somebody else has it on now. We had 17 views on the last meeting. So
How did that 17 views compare to the previous meetings?
17 more because we haven't done it that way in the past.
So that was after the fact views. That wasn't participating.
Well, I know Lucy was watching live.
Yeah, no, Lucy was.
Beyond that, I really don't know.
Okay.
Are we in the citizens comment arena right now or what?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Getting ready to start.
Gotcha.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and start? Mr. McKnight, will you lead us with an invocation, please?
I will. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening and for the opportunities that we have to do good in our community. And we pray that you would be with those who are working so hard on our behalf, our employees, our police, the first responders, those who are involved in food distribution and gathering that food so it can be given to those who need it most. And we pray, Heavenly Father, that you bless our meeting tonight, that you protect our families, that you protect our community from the virus, and that you would help us as we plan for both our needs and our future, that you would help us and give us the wisdom that we need to do it effectively. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, let's try the pledge here a little. Maybe we can get it a little better than last time.
Looks good.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America, and
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was a
Can
little
we
bit.
sing, can we sing the Star Spangled Banner?
It's like a round.
We still need a little more practice, but that was better.
Somebody has to have a baton or something.
Okay.
All right, Lindsay, ready for roll call?
All right, Mr. Penner,
I'm here.
Mrs. Deal, Present. Mr. Sinkovitz,
Here?
Mr. Erickson,
Present.
Mr. Darius,
Present.
and it looks like Mr. Crouch has not joined us yet.
He actually, I just admitted him, so he should be in any second.
Oh, there he is. Mr. Crouch, can you hear us?
I don't see his microphone yet. There we go. Hi, Michael, you here?
I'm here.
Okay. We just did the invocation and the pledge allegiance, so Lindsay just took roll call. All right. Let's get into citizens' comments. Fred, do you want to share the one that you received today?
We have an email from Lucy. She cannot be with us tonight. She has another commitment. She states she walks around the elementary school and she has noticed the mayor and Carol Graham working at the garden, and she wishes to congratulate them for working at the community garden. She also asks the question, how is cross-training with the water and sewer operators progressing? The cross-training has not started yet. The intermunicipal agreement is being drafted and worked out between Newville Borough and also West Pennsboro Township. Once the agreement is in place, then the training will start. She also asked, if power goes out, will the water and sewer system still operate? Well, the elevated tanks would keep the town fed with water for up to 3 days. The water plant requires a remote generator to be brought in, as does Lachlan Mill. But all the other facilities, all the sewer facilities, the pump station and sewer plant, they can operate on generator power. So there is a plan in place to bring in generators for the water plant and the Lachlan Mill. But in the meantime, we would work off our storage towers, which should give us about 2, maybe 2.5, 3 days of water. Those were the comments from Lucy. There is a letter from Steve Noggle. Mr. Noggle owns a apartment building on Finley Street. And he states, I would like to know why my rental would need re-inspection 5 months after passing your inspection. Seems like such a waste of everyone's time and energy. I guess you don't want rentals in Newville, so I will be selling my place soon. And his last comment was, and to charge someone for re-inspection that was already done and passed is just wrong. First of all, if your apartment has been inspected and passed, you would not need a re-inspection for 3 years. And you would only be charged if you have a failed inspection. The first inspection of your apartment would be at the cost of the borough. So I think there's just some misinformation here. And I will respond with a letter and clarify his concern. Lindsay, do you have anything under correspondence or citizens?
No, I think the only other 2 comments that we got were from Diana Mullen and Shani Shank, and that was just some clarifications on the proposed ordinance for the tenant. The tenant ordinance. Basically, they just wanted to know how much it would cost them, and currently the cost is $65 for that. And if they continue to fail after that, it would be administrative fees on top of that.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, I've checked my email. We've had no other emails come in at 6 o'clock. And I've also checked the Dropbox in front of the municipal building, and there were no comments in the Dropbox. So that concludes the messages that we have for tonight's meeting.
Okay, and as we go through the meeting, I'll check YouTube to see if there's any comments posted on there as well. We did get a thank you. We did get a thank you letter from Shani Shank from the Big Spring Food Bank, thanking us for our donation to the food bank, and also thanking for all the help that the borough has provided through the change in their process of distributing meals or food, not meals, and stuff like that. So that was nice.
Could I make a comment, Scott?
Yep, sure.
I appreciate Lucy's kind comment, but I want to reiterate with everyone, when I am at the garden working, Carol Graham is not there. When Carol Graham is working at the garden, I am not there. We are sticking to the school district's stipulation that only one person at a time can be there. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else?
May I make a comment?
Sure can.
I have a problem being a landlord and a council member. I wonder if there could be a conflict of interest. Is there a conflict of interest?
I'm going to defer to Marcus on this one. I mean, you're not voting on any of your properties per se particularly, but Marcus, what do you think?
You obviously, it's not a conflict to own property in the borough, whether it's a home or an apartment. That doesn't preclude you from dealing with an ordinance which deals with regulations. So I'd say there's no conflict.
Okay. All right, so let's move down to legal matters.
Okay, now,
Go ahead.
may I
Go ahead,
follow
Bob.
up with that?
Okay.
Several landlords have expressed their concerns with the proposed inspection licensing ordinance as being anti-rental business and punitive. I want to share that concern with you. The council looks at community interest, and I'm part of the council.
Right.
We're looking at it at large, but I believe it should respond to taxpayers' concerns as well. We should not, as council, be seen as arrogant and indifferent toward citizen taxpayer concerns. This is a serious perception challenge for us as council members. We're caught between a rock and a hard place, a metaphor which I think may apply.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. But when we get further down to that ordinance, we can have a much more in-depth conversation of some things that we can maybe do to help with that perception. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
all right, so under legal matters, number one, discuss and review the proposed resolution 2020-05. This would be the resolution to extend the real estate property tax, and this says discount period, and waiving penalties in accordance with Act 15 of 2020. We cannot extend the discount period. Just a little background before Marcus chimes in here. There has to be a collaboration between us and the county because both bills are collected at the same time through the same process. The county has decided to not extend the discount period. Instead, what they're looking to do is extend the face period until November 30th, which I believe then, instead of saying extending the real estate property discount period, we should change that to the face period. Go ahead, Marcus. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, we had submitted a different proposal to the county through their solicitor, and I'm sure that the county was going to do something anyway, but it spurred them on to making a decision with regard to both the discount period and then extending the period in which you could pay at face value before the penalty set in. So we got at least part of what we wanted. We got that extension.
So, so this resolution, what it would do is basically there would be no penalty until December 1st. Then after December 1st, the penalty period would kick in for that 1 month, essentially, or until the bill was paid.
And I think the reasoning behind it is a simple one, and that is it would be a headache because a lot of large taxpayers have already paid at the discount, and to have to refund that, it would be a headache for us and for every other municipality. So there is some wisdom in their decision.
So this is a resolution that we'll take up on May 26th. Any other items, discussion items from anybody else? Questions, comments?
Correction, the face period extends to November 1st, and the penalty period would be November 2nd to December 31st.
Oh, okay,
And
so
the resolution was corrected to indicate what we received from the county solicitor.
yeah, so we won't have to reimburse anybody that pays between now and the end of the month, so we'll be good. Okay. Any other questions, comments on that? Okay. Item number 2, ordinance 2020-05. This was to amend the provisions relating to the prohibition or prohibited signage in all districts. This ordinance will be advertised for May 26th. I believe there's a slight change in language in one section that came across my email today. Marcus, do you know what that exactly was? I think it was
Yes.
just for-
If you take the original draft that we had in our packets, when I looked at that, you couldn't tell whether or not we were actually prohibiting a sign or actually encouraging signs of that nature. So I wanted to make sure, and I added the language which basically says, amend section 4.54 to add the following to the list of prohibited signs. So if you picked up the ordinance amendment, you won't be confused that we're talking about prohibited signs as opposed to authorizing new signs which do the opposite of what we want. The original language didn't have the word prohibited signs.
Any questions on that? Okay.
Again,
Item-
that'll be ready for adoption at the end of the month.
Okay. Item number 3, ordinance 2020-06. This is the ordinance establishing the shade tree ordinance for the borough. That is in your packets. Questions, comments, anything to add to that, Marcus?
No, it sort of speaks for itself, but it's I think the last time we talked about it, the mayor had insight into how this will clarify who's in charge of what with regard to the shade tree issues.
Yeah, I had a bunch of questions about it, but we don't need to go through them now. I think it's just because I don't know much understand how this works. So maybe Fred, I'll give you a call and we can talk about it.
Mayor, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm fine with my remarks from the last meeting.
The only thing I would like to add is I sent this ordinance off to Bob Over, and I asked Bob to look at it because Bob was originally mayor at the time this ordinance passed. And he was the person who was responsible for the Shade Tree Commission. When I came here in '94, they were doing their plantings. So I sent this off to Bob and he reviewed it, and he would like to thank council for drafting the ordinance and keeping the shade tree regulations alive. Even though it won't be done through a shade tree commission, he was happy to see the council was going to keep regulations in place to maintain and preserve the shade trees. He had no comments on the ordinance or revisions or corrections.
Mayor, I had spoken to you earlier, I guess last fall, about removal of the 2 trees in front of our house.
Yes.
Now I noticed that there's language in here saying that if trees are removed from this point forward, that they would have to be replaced with other trees.
See, when I looked at the ordinance, I think there's a list of recommended trees that they can be replaced with. But when we spoke about this back and forth last year, Mike, it came down to the fact that the 2 trees you want removed are owned by the Big Spring Presbyterian.
Right.
As part of that property. If they're okay with the trees coming down, then there's no reason why they can't come down. But under this, the new ordinance, I think the property owner it is now responsible to replace trees if they so desire. In your situation, Mike, that would also be the church.
Right. And I have not been able to coordinate a meeting with them yet to find that out. So.
And Marcus, if I read the language right, it says as a condition to any permit or to remove any shade tree, the council shall recommend that the applicant plant at his own expense another tree in its place. That doesn't make them, it doesn't require them to replace it, correct?
No, and we would take, I would imagine, various factors into consideration. Any proposed replacement of the tree and the surrounding area, that the impact of removing the tree on the surrounding area. So, I think we'd use common sense in what we require after we heard the feelings of the individuals owning the house or the property, as well as those who might be impacted, neighbors and so on.
One other thought I've had with the shade trees that have been planted prior. There are a number of places as you walk through the borough where the roots from these trees are actually buckling the sidewalks and so forth. How do we deal with that situation? Because I know sidewalk repair is also a concern that we've talked about in the past year.
I believe that the last couple of years, the borough has actually given assistance in helping the property owner remove some of the trees, if that's the case. I mean, not financial assistance, but the borough street crew has helped with that. That's something. If a homeowner bought the house and the tree was already there, and it has damaged their sidewalk, then I think whatever assistance we can that we're able to give them, we should.
Thank you.
You're saying not financial assistance, correct?
No.
Right.
But the I know of several locations where property owners wanted the trees to come down for that very reason, and the borough street crew helped with that effort.
I assume the list of trees are trees that do not cause superficial damage to sidewalks until they're very mature, if then. Is that correct? Am I reading too much into that list?
The tree list was taken from Carlisle Borough, which is a tree certified community. And we only are including medium-sized trees and small trees that would not have root structure that would damage sidewalks. And the statement that the mayor made is correct. We've removed some trees at the request of property owners. In some cases, property owners did not replace the trees. They put in flowering planter pits, where they bricked over the openings, or they concreted over the openings. A good example of that is in front of the police station. A tree was removed there, and we concreted in that space.
I think going back to when these trees were planted, the type of trees that were planted, the tree pits, the planting pits, were about half the size of what they should have been for those trees.
Exactly.
The problem with that is in some of the locations, it would take half the width of your sidewalk if the tree pits were the correct size.
Yeah, and it looks like the tree pits now are the correct size, of 36 by 48, which will, greatly limit the number of places that you can put them. Basically, you're only going to be able to put a tree in the sidewalk at a place where we have a double wide sidewalk, which, but Randy's, or the mayor is correct. Our pits are way too small, and that's one reason why the root systems are damaging sidewalks. All right, anything else for that? Okay, that one again, we would take action on at the end of the month.
Correct.
Discuss ordinance 2020-07, which is the rental unit ordinance. So just so we all have the same understanding. So this was taking two ordinances, marrying them together into one ordinance with an emphasis on you know, basically rewarding the property owners who maintain their properties and basically keep their properties in good condition. They get rewarded because they don't have to pay for the inspection unless it fails. They also get a list of the items that are going to be inspected ahead of time, and that I think that's pretty much the gist of it. What else am I missing there?
Well, I remember from the last meeting at in the council room when we discussed this, we were in this routine where we had some landlords whose properties failed multiple times, and we were paying for the re-inspections. We were paying the time for the Commonwealth Code inspector to go back, and we can't continue to do that.
Can I ask Bob? He said before that there were some landlords who are objecting to this and viewing it as anti-rental. Can you explain, Bob, exactly what their objection is?
Well, I said, we're pro-business. I said, I'm on the council. I have to look at it as a member of the council and also as a landlord. They seem to get the impression that really the council is not pro-business for rentals.
Well, that's what I'm asking. What are
that-
they objecting to specifically?
They're making it harder and harder to do business in rentals in Newville.
How is that making it harder
That's
to do
basically-
business?
That we are indifferent and we're arrogant and they're taxpayers. And
But
they don't
I'm
listen.
asking about the specific ordinance. What is it about this ordinance that they object to?
Well, they didn't, they were talking in generalities, these people. One of them said it's too harsh and it's not encouraging for small mom and pop businesses of rental houses need. The
I guess I
kind of
don't understand
things
that.
Or somewhere.
Well, I mean, it is making the first inspection free. And then
Well,
only
that
people
was
who
before-
don't take the inspection seriously wind up paying for it later. So how is that anti-business? I think it could be said that it's pro-business in that it is allowing an inspection to be done for free.
Well, I think that was the case before also, the first inspection free. And I just like the mayor mentioned, when it goes to the third, then they should pay. I have rentals too. And if they fail the first time, we made sure that by the second time, it will pass. So so far, we've never had to go into a third iteration. But I knew that if I go into a third iteration, I will have to pay. But that's myself. Other people have different views toward it.
But I
And,
think they
I guess
should,
they call me because they know that I feel like I could listen to their concerns.
I think they should hopefully understand the borough's not doing the rental inspection program to make money. But we have an expectation that we will at least cover what it's costing us to have the program to begin with. And if it's landlords who have apartments that fail and have to be re-inspected, and they should be reminded that the inspector sends out a list of what they're looking for before the inspection. I find it difficult to understand how an apartment could fail an inspection when the landlord knows in advance what the requirements are. It's not anti-business, but we can't run a program of any kind that costs us more than we take in, or that's not a very good business practice if you want to talk about running a business.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Joey.
When a rental unit is inspected, okay, and say they have an infraction, and the inspector comes back the second time to re-inspect it. Now, are they just re-inspecting the infraction, or are they going back over the whole rental unit? And is it the same inspector re-inspecting it?
Good question.
Well,
What they're inspecting for is the infraction, to see if it was corrected. And Shani is the person, Shani Shank,
Hmm,
does the inspections for us.
okay. Okay, thanks.
one of them mentioned the $500 and $1,000. Those are punitive. And I have to go back to the page number to find out where that was. But I think it was under failure to register or failure to seek a rental license or something of that nature.
Yeah.
But anyway, the perception they get that it's all in terms of that it's not pro-business, that it's not encouraging people who are in this business, and there is a shortage of housing in the country. And Newville is a nice community. It's a low-income community, and that they should be encouraged to do better and take care of their places, and not having to worry about paying $1,000 fine or $500 fine. They think that's a money-making scheme.
So let's talk real briefly about the penalties. It's on page 9 of that ordinance. So the first one is revocation of the rental registration or of rental license. So a fine of not less than $500 per rental unit shall be imposed on the owner for each month of this violation. Each month of the violation exists constitutes a separate violation. Explain that one to us, Marcus. That is, so basically you have your rental license pulled and they continue to operate. Is that what that's saying?
Yes, and what you're doing is, it's like any violation of a code ordinance that you want to see corrected. It's trying to build an incentive in for the landlord to correct it, or to do what needs to be done to get his license reinstated. Remember, we just sent letters out for people who hadn't paid their property taxes, who were landlords, for the prior year. So these are issues that are designed to encourage landlords to act in a responsible fashion. And that doesn't necessarily mean that fine will be imposed, but that's the maximum fine that can be imposed.
And that also requires an act of council, correct? To revoke that license.
Yes.
And there is an appeals process to that as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not like it would be a surprise. We're talking somebody who's failed 5 or 6 times or who has completely ignored the inspection process, that they would be fined.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask for a clarification here? When the term rental unit, does that designate the property no matter how many apartments are in it, or is it per unit within the property? Because
It could be
the language to me is not clear on that.
Well, it could be a maximum per rental unit. So yes,
say per apartment.
Yeah, if you had 5 units, it could be 500 for each unit. Is that the way it was supposed to be written, Fred?
No, it's per each rental unit. You may have an apartment building with 5 units and 4 of the 5 are passing. You're only dealing in terms of your enforcement with the one that is not passed. So the penalty would only apply to the rental unit that is in violation, not the entire building.
And that's what I attempted to say, but Fred did it better.
Okay, penalty number 2, failure to register or failure to seek a rental license. This one again, $500 per rental unit. This is one for somebody who's running basically running a rental unit without getting a license, correct?
Right, and that's an easy thing to see happen if you aren't careful about having some penalty like this going on, because it could just be a friend who came down for a while and he's just paying some of your expenses. You know, suddenly you have 4 units in the same building with all sorts of friends who you've just met and they've signed leases or something and we don't know about it.
Right. Any questions on that one? Number 3, any owner who violates other sections of this ordinance, subject to a fine not to be more than $1,000. What would that be?
Well, again, that's a maximum fine. Knowing the way enforcement occurs, normally we look at someone's track record. A first offense would never be that high. So it's a matter of what sort of history do they have and how compliant or how contrite they are in saying this won't happen again. Let me say an overview. A good landlord is one who knows what's going on in his own apartment building, which means he has regular inspections. He listens to tenant complaints about things that are wrong. He takes a look at what we're asking for in inspections and does his homework. It's like getting the answers to the test before the test happens. So good landlords can really go to town and take advantage of the ordinance and what it does and never run the risk of penalties. This is designed to encourage those that are less than good landlords to do the right thing. And if they won't do it voluntarily, eventually the fines will get high enough that they'll end up doing it, or they'll lose their right to have rental units in Newville.
And the last 2 look like they're pretty just like umbrella penalties.
Right.
Marcus, would you say that any of these are extraordinary for boroughs?
No,
These are common in boroughs all across the country.
I haven't done a study or compared to, say, Carlisle's ordinances, but Fred, have you looked at any in comparison?
Yeah, I think the language that you're seeing here, and remember this fine isn't being set by anyone from the borough. It's being set by a district justice after a hearing before the district court. So the judge decides the penalty. And what you see here is an amount up to $1,000. It could be 100, it could be whatever the judge sets it at, but it's not set by the borough council or any employee of the borough. This is in a proceeding before a magisterial district judge where the judge decides the penalty, not anyone from the borough.
Okay. Any other questions about penalties? So if I'm looking at this right, let's say I'm a rental unit owner and I have rental units. My time is up to get an inspection. I get the list 30 days ahead of time of what's going to be looked at. And I can go and make sure that my building has all of those things taken care of. The inspector comes in 30 days, inspects it, it passes, I'm done, correct? I'm done for 3 years. If I fail, let's say one of my 3 units, the other 2 are good. The one that failed, he has to come back and check that I fixed that 1 or 2 items, and that I would pay that $65 fee, which is what it costs for a re-inspection, correct?
That's it.
And if I just blow everything off, then, well, I got the penalties that are in here that I can deal with.
I just want to clarify one thing. I have had inspections done several times, and in all cases, we passed by the second time because they came in and said, all right, did you do this, this, and that? I said, yes, we did. And we went more than that. We went the other one, which was recommended action as well. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm just mentioning these 2 based on what I heard from other people who thought that since I'm a landlord that I would speak for them. And I said, well, I'm also a council member. I have to have the broader perspective of what is good for the entire community in mind. But I would raise the issues that you've raised. And I raised some of them. And it's up to them to really write to the council, not me. I mean, they shouldn't be calling me, actually. They should be sending the letters to Mr. Potzer or the council.
Yeah, my understanding is that we had, so just so everybody also knows, this ordinance was either emailed or mailed to every single landlord in the borough. So they have a chance to look at the ordinance and review it. Fred, can you review any questions or comments that we got back?
Well, you just heard the comments from one gentleman who we can respond to. They're just misconceptions of the ordinance. The other comments that we had were very general in nature from landlords that had, what the question was, what's the difference between this ordinance and the existing ordinances? And basically, it's the reduction from 5 years down to 3 years, and the requirement that failed inspections become the responsibility of the landlord. Those are the major changes.
Okay. No, any real negative reaction to that?
Well, the 2 people who emailed, when we responded to them, they thanked us, and I've heard nothing further.
Okay.
Hey, Scott,
Yes,
can I ask Bob a question?
sure.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
the 2 people that complained to you, the landlords, do they live in town or outside of town? Do you know?
And they live in town.
Okay. Because some of the landlords live outside of town, don't know what we do here. So I always wonder if they were residents here in town or not.
These 2 live in town, yes. The problem is, I think one of the problems is they read this and they're overwhelmed. They see $500, they see $1,000. They see a drop from 5 years to 3 years. They see changes they think are anti-landlord changes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or they view it that way. I don't view it that way myself. I think we're trying to improve the places where people will come and live. But I would love to see this applied to everybody, all the properties, not just the rentals, but also homeowners. But I don't think that's legal. I don't think we can do that. But if we did that, we could encourage people to improve the facade of their properties and fix their sidewalks, do a lot of things that I think are great long-term things to do. Just, if we had Kevin Carlisle on Main Street and have lightings on Main Street, like West Big Spring Avenue, it would be beautiful. This town could really help, could really look a lot better than it does now. It's a great little community to live in. It's a nice, peaceful place to live in. There's a lot of positive things about Newville, but people think about some of the negative things, unfortunately. That's
Bob,
Well,
just a point, several years ago, the position that you mentioned there about rental properties being held to one standard and owner occupied being held to another standard, that's all been remedied. The Borough Council has adopted the International Property Maintenance Code. That maintenance code applies to rental properties and also owner occupied. So we have only one code for the borough, and that's
That's
the
wonderful.
International Property Maintenance Code, which the Borough Council has adopted.
Is it being implemented?
Go ahead, Bob.
Is it being implemented to both homeowners and landlords?
That's what Pennsylvania Code Alliance uses. That is the code that they utilize here in the borough, the International Property Maintenance Code.
Great.
The 500 and up fines have been part of our rental ordinance almost from the beginning. And I had said before, it comes down to the good judgment of the inspector. Remember, part of our discussion at our last borough office meeting, we discussed a landlord who had multiple apartments fail, was blowing off the inspector, not responding to phone calls, not showing up for the inspections. It's situations like that where you roll out the $500 to $1,000 fines. People who fail an inspection for a simple reason and then they repair it, you know, it would be terrible judgment to roll out that fine for something like that. I think we all have the judgment to know when a fine like that would be necessary, as opposed to just a normal run-of-the-mill violation.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's the perception that they get from reading something like this. It's I can't explain that. I mean, people read something, they get upset. Then they say, "Oh boy, they've got it for landlords."
And Bob, looking back, we probably should have done a one pager or something like that saying these are the changes to the current ordinances. And, you know, that way they could just look at what those changes were versus, you know, like I agree. And you get a, 9-10 page document that's, legal, that it can be a little overwhelming at times. So I understand what you're saying, and we probably should have done that, but we didn't. And
frankly, legalese is legalese, and I believe in KISS, keeping it simple and stupid. Some of these paragraphs are so convoluted that they should be broken down into several sentences, but they're not. I mean, it's going to take a rewrite, in my opinion, for what it's worth.
well, I think we also have to, it has to be legalese. So
It has to be, well, okay, then, but then we should have an explanation, just like you mentioned, 1 or 2 pages in front saying, these are the major changes we've made.
right. And that maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea, just to go ahead and do that. And even maybe just a real quick summary of this is the steps, that we go through. So
I would be in favor of that very much. I think we need to change this perception that we're sitting there on the council. I think we ought to give the impression and the image and the perception that we are for the people. We represent the taxpayers. We work for them. We're giving our time for free to help the community. That we're
Bob, I hope you remind landlords that our desire at the borough is the same as theirs. And that is, we want to protect their most valuable asset, their real property. So we want things well maintained, that the value of the rental units in general are maintained so that when they go to resell the property, they get maximum value that way. Well-maintained buildings sell better. Having good tenants who care about their property along with the landlord really make a difference. And that's exactly where the borough wants to be. We want to have rental properties and private homes well-maintained and have people take a certain pride in them. And that's what we're trying to encourage. So in that sense, the interest of the Borough Council and the landlords is the same. We want to see that property value maintained and actually increase over time.
I wish we could convey that before we send them these draft ordinances. in simple language. I mean, they're not attorneys. They're simple, down to earth people. They see 6 pages of legalese, they get scared.
All right, any other questions, comments on the ordinance?
Yeah, I have a few.
Okay,
On page 2, it talks about nuisance rental property. It defines it. Means any rental property in which there are 3 or more criminal complaints to or by the Borough Newville Police Department. Why is it criminal complaints only?
It's designed to encourage landlords to pick and choose tenants with character. We were having a serious problem with crime in apartment units in which that wasn't being done. And so, and again, most of the calls to our police were coming from 1 or 2 units or properties in which the quality of the tenants was very poor.
Is there a reason not to extend that to civil complaints?
We're concerned about people committing crimes in the borough primarily.
We're not concerned with uncivil behavior.
Well, civil deals with money disputes. Criminal deals with people who are committing crimes, usually against other people within the borough. Mayor, am I stating that correctly?
Yes. And we've had this in the previous ordinance where we did have a few years ago when the Violence Against Women Act was passed, that if it's a domestic issue and the woman is the victim, we were no longer allowed to count that as one of the 3 criminal complaint issues if it would eventually result in the woman who's the actual victim being evicted from the apartment. It encompasses other types of crimes other than that.
Marcus, if there were a tenant who had very loud parties every night, starting at 10 p.m. and going through 2 a.m. every night, is that not a civil issue of some sort? Would that not be?
Well, it certainly can be a civil issue, although usually it's neighbors who are complaining about something like that.
Right.
But what we're really concerned about, quite frankly, is discouraging drug houses. I'll be blunt. With hardcore drug houses, heroin, cocaine, that sort of activity, we would not want to see landlords encouraging that.
Yeah, of course, nobody would.
Well, I'm just saying that's exactly why it's in this ordinance.
Right, and I guess I'm asking the question, is it appropriate to extend this toward other kinds of uncivil behavior that makes this a difficult community to be in sometimes?
Mr. Mayor, if it was a sound violation, wouldn't that still fall under a criminal complaint?
It would depend on how it would be graded. If basically this section of the rental ordinance is directed towards people who commit felonies. If it's a misdemeanor level or even a summary level noise complaint or disorderly conduct, this section would not apply. Could they be cited with a non-traffic criminal citation? Sure. But it doesn't apply to the, I guess, 3 strikes and you're out.
No, it doesn't. The way it's written, it doesn't apply. I'm asking is, could it be written in such a way that it would include some of those behaviors, those antisocial behaviors that
In a small town, you want neighbors who get along. In an ideal situation, you'd never see disputes among neighbors or among relatives, but that's inevitable. And quite frankly, our police do an excellent job of trying to be peacemakers in those situations. So at this point, until it becomes a real problem, we don't want to make it so. We don't want to encourage strife by making people try to bring charges that have real teeth in them against people who are just not getting along with them.
You also have to keep in mind that these type of issues are going to be settled in court, and they're not going to uphold an eviction more often than not for someone who made too much noise. Serious criminal violations, they have no problem with upholding an eviction. What they deal with, dozens of times a month, disorderly conduct, noise violations, that type of thing, they're not going to consider that reason for an eviction. And we have to be mindful of that, so that when we have a situation that gets to that point, that we are on solid legal ground when we do it.
Okay. So repetitive behavior of that sort is not something that we want to try to address through something like this.
We certainly will send the police to do some disorderly conduct citations, but we can't use this section for something like that.
Right, exactly. I mean, the way it's written.
Whether we would like to or not, we can't.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hold up.
Remember, the first person to get a complaint usually is the landlord.
I'm not sure I understand the implications of that, Marcus.
Well, but the implications are that landlords would have an interest in stopping the complaints by having tenants who get along with each other. So.
Okay. Okay.
That is part of the standard thing the police department does. If they have multiple complaints of any kind that revolve around one rental unit, they are going to be on the phone to the landlord fairly quickly.
Okay. All right. Just a couple of other questions back to criminal complaints. Why did we pick 3? Why do you have to have 3 criminal complaints before an eviction?
Because we're giving the landlord every chance to correct the issue.
Okay. Right. It seems a lot to me. And then,
I have a comment on the police department.
well, let me finish.
I'm sorry.
And then finally, if there are criminal complaints, but when you say criminal complaint, is that a founded criminal complaint? In other words, has somebody
That's where someone's actually arrested criminally, yes.
has been arrested, but suppose it's found to be an error? I guess I'm trying to find out if this is actually, on the one hand, I'm concerned it may not be comprehensive enough. On the other, I'm sort of concerned that you could be arrested several times, but have the complaint proved to be unfounded, and is that taken into consideration?
In past experiences, when I was the chief, it was 3 criminal complaints where the person either pled guilty or was convicted.
Okay.
And then one other step we would take, if it was a major drug violation, and we would do a search warrant on the residence and we found significant quantities of drugs, landlord would get a letter from the county district attorney's forfeiture officer telling them the people go, or we'll do a forfeiture on your property.
Okay. Just moving on to page 3, where it talks about rental registration, and that if a property owner lives more than 10 miles from Newville, they have to have an agent whose name and address are available and telephone number. It doesn't say that the agent has to be in Newville. So how does this improve the situation? If you live in New York City and you own a property here and you have an agent who also lives in New York City and you give them the tenant their phone number, how does that improve their situation? Should it be required to be a local agent? Somebody can get their hands on.
Well, there are companies that manage properties for landlords. And normally they're in multiple municipalities, and they're responsible agents that way. So we're basically saying, if you're not going to be in the borough managing your property and you're further than 10 miles away, we'd rather have a professional agent who we're dealing with, or at least someone who acts responsibly. If that person doesn't act responsibly, then we do have problems with the landlord in general.
I think what he's saying is that there's nothing in this section that says that that agent has to live within 10 miles of the borough.
Right, that's
And
correct.
So they don't have to?
They don't.
Okay.
So how does that improve the situation?
Because you have professional agents who maybe have their headquarters in Carlisle or Shippensburg or Chambersburg or someplace that manage multiple units in many municipalities, and they do respond as an agent if one of their units that they're in charge of is having issues. And that's, you want someone who knows something about the law and somebody who's responsible.
I
Fred,
think,
what kind of history have you had, Fred, with agents?
Most of the landlords manage their properties. Obviously, several engage Mike Adler, Sterling Property Management. Mike does a really good job. Some use the JLX Corporation in Shippensburg, but all of the managers are local people. They are not, they're within a 10-mile radius of the borough. I know of none that are outside of a 10-mile radius.
Okay, so there's
Most
no,
of the landlords manage their properties and affairs.
all right, so there's no problem with that. I mean, I thought the idea of having an agent was if you're not living in Newville, you're not easily reachable. So you should have an agent who's easily reachable, but you're saying it's all handled through property companies who are established and local, if not in Newville, and so that's not really an issue.
Since 2006, Jack, it has not been an issue. It's
Okay.
not been an issue.
Okay. All right, well, that's it. I just needed those clarifications. Thanks.
Okay, Bob, I think you had something to say about the nuisance
Yes,
property.
I think it's commendable for the police department to help us as landlords. As soon as I get an application, Lisa, who works in our office, takes a copy of it and drops it in the slot for the police department, and they've been very responsive. So was the former chief of police, Finke. Mr. Finke, he personally looked at it and called me, or used to call my wife. She passed away, I'm sorry. But anyway, so they've been very good. They've been excellent.
Very good.
We have a great little town in here, but we can't give that image to people that this is a nice place to live. That the borough council is not a bunch of prima donnas. That they're really here to help us. They're here to help the people, the citizens. It's part of the perception problem that Newville has. We've got to do something.
Any other questions, comments about the rental ordinance?
Just proofreading here a little bit. Marcus, page 7, under section 7. The first sentence says a rental resignation issued here under. Is that supposed to be registration?
Probably.
And
Yes.
then the same wording is in the title for section 9.
We'll make those changes.
Anything else? All right. Would it be okay for us to vote to advertise these for the meeting at the end of the month? I mean, it's just action to advertise it for action. So your call. If you'd rather hold off until the end of the month to do that, that's up to you. But these won't go into effect until June then.
Should go ahead with it.
Right.
Is that a motion and a second?
Yes, I second it.
So the motion is to advertise ordinances 2020-05, -06, and -07. It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Did somebody say no? Okay. All right, motion carries. The new item that was added was to approve the resolution naming Fred Potzer as the applicant agent for preparation and submission of disaster assistance funding from FEMA for COVID-19 emergencies. Fred, do you want to take this one real quick?
The process has started now through FEMA. We had our applicant briefing today, and we will now begin a process of making application, filling out forms, submitting those to FEMA. Because of the virus, we cannot have in-person meetings. We cannot have, everything will be done electronically or by telephone. We can only claim for wages, equipment, and personal protective equipment, and modifications to structures. But it all has to relate to the COVID-19 virus. It encompasses a time period from March 31st to the end of September. And that's the time period that we can work in. So we've already started gathering our costs, developing spreadsheets. We've completed all of our disaster assistance forms today, and they're here awaiting the council president's signature. Once they're signed, they'll be submitted on Friday. And we are eligible, as is the municipal authority, to claim expenses and damages. So this resolution that Scott has mentioned is a part of the process where you can name a person to serve as your agent. All that does is give that person the authorization to file the forms on behalf of the municipality and to meet with the FEMA administrators to answer questions. If anyone else wants to do it, I'll be happy to.
No, that's okay, Fred.
Was that your joke for the night?
That was it, and that's it.
Okay.
You do a great job, Fred.
All right, so I would say this is time sensitive, so he can get the ball rolling on that. And if we can take action on that tonight, that would be great.
Let's go for it.
So Bob has moved it. Do we have a second?
Second. Ed, second.
Ed seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We need to go back to the motion to advertise, and I think I have a problem here. So Marcus, under item number 1 and number 2, they're both numbered 2020-05.
But the one's a resolution.
Yes, one's a resolution, one's an
That's
ordinance.
why. There we go. And we already passed that one, so we don't even need to do it. We did pass that, right?
Yeah.
Did we pass number 1?
05 we passed.
Okay, so we didn't do 1. Can we hold off on that one till, or do they need to know? They need to know by May 20th, don't they?
I think you've adopted the resolution. I thought you took care of that.
Did we? I don't remember. I didn't take notes.
Lindsay, do you have a motion and a second for 2020-05, the resolution?
For the first item under legal matters, yeah, I thought you just grouped them all together when you asked to take the vote.
No, that they were for the ordinances for 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so
Let's formally adopt 05,
all right,
resolution 05.
because they need to know by May 20th, correct?
That's right.
All right, so you have a resolution in front of you, 2020-05, which would extend the rental tax discount period and waive penalties in accordance with Act 15 of 2020. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Bob motioned it. We have a
Second.
second. Michael seconded. Is that right, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, Michael seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, down to administrative committee. Michael, do you want to take care of those?
I'm going to defer to Fred on this because I actually was supposed to meet with him yesterday and wasn't able to make that. So I'm not really familiar with everything that's on here.
Okay, well, we can go through it. It's basically, you all recall meeting here in February for the monthly meeting. And at that time, we had an extended discussion about landlords who had not paid their property taxes. So we are down to a list of 2 landlords. We will not mention their names. They are delinquent in property taxes, so it would be appropriate simply to refer the list to the borough solicitor. He can have his paralegal check at the courthouse to make sure that the taxes are still not paid. And then at that point, send the appropriate notice to the landlords advising that in accordance with the existing ordinance, not the proposed ordinance, but the existing ordinance, they must have their taxes paid in order to receive a license from the borough. So all you're doing here is authorizing the solicitor to take action in accordance with the Borough Rental Ordinance 2006-01.
Any of the landlords on that list have a property that currently has tenants in it?
Yes,
I know you send out the packets in November or December. It can't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to fill out a tenant registration form and a license renewal form. This is the kind of stuff that the 500 and up was designed to remedy. You know, here we are in May, and we still have a few landlords who haven't even renewed a registration.
that's correct. And Mayor, if you recall, council members, you authorized me to send a letter to the landlords who were delinquent, and you gave them until February 14th. So they've had more than ample notice from the borough to comply. And so at this point, it would be appropriate to turn the matter over to Mr. McKnight. There are 2 landlords here that we are dealing with. We're down to 2.
How many units do they represent? Fred, do you know offhand?
7.
7.
And Fred,
Okay.
we've had some
I don't know if
success.
you're having a problem.
Go ahead, Fred.
I don't know if you're having a problem hearing me, but I
No,
keep
we're
getting
good.
a message that my bandwidth is narrow and I may lose connection. So if I lose connection, I'm not being ignorant to you, but I'm
You've
having
been
a
good. We
problem.
haven't had any problem with you.
It says it's now telling me my internet connection is unstable.
Well,
Sounds frightening.
Yeah.
Well, you look a lot
Take that however
stabler
you
than your
want.
connection.
Really?
Reminds me of the old Mission Impossible where the smoke comes out.
folks, do you want to take action on this now, or do you want to wait until the meeting in May, at the end of the month?
No, let's do it now.
So moved.
Jack has moved it. You second.
Second.
Who said second?
Ed.
Ed seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, item number 2.
The next item has to do with the budget adjustments, and these adjustments have been given to you previously. What we're doing here is trying to be proactive regarding our budget and the current virus situation. As you know, there's going to be an impact from the number of people who are unemployed. There's going to be an impact to us from the businesses that have closed. There's going to be an impact from housing sales that are down. So if you just look at the top of the sheet, we're projecting a realty transfer tax reduction of about $7,000. That's down from $14,000. Earned income tax, we're projecting a reduction of $65,000. Now I can tell you today's EIT return was about $7,000, which was down by only $2,000 from the same time last year. So I have sent out to you a report from the Commonwealth Tax Bureau, the Cumberland County Tax Bureau, and they're projecting losses of maybe 6 to 7%, which is not quite as drastic as what we're looking at here. But nonetheless, we're going to have some reduction in earned income tax. Local service tax, even the Tax Bureau indicates that with a number of people unemployed, the local service tax is going to be down. And here in town, there are a lot of people that are laid off. For example, the drugstore is closed. Some of the restaurants have laid off people. So that all impacts your local service tax. Also, vehicle code violations are going to be down. Traffic stops and so forth are fewer. Local ordinance violations, we projected a loss there as well. So the revenue loss that we are anticipating is $82,000. And that's what we're preparing for. So what we've done in order to meet that is I've gone through the budget and I've itemized reductions in the budget to offset that loss of revenue. Those revenue or those expenditure reductions include the summer recreation program being cut by $10,000, donations to John Graham Library and the Big Spring Senior Center being cut by $500 each, trailhead maintenance being reduced by $1,200, capital improvements for public works, which included a public works storage building and line painter. Those items have been eliminated at a cost of $20,000. Contracted services, which would be street paving, has been reduced by $35,000. Stormwater management has been reduced by $7,500. Operating expenses in the police department, which basically include training of the officers, have been reduced by $1,000. The reason for that is many of the training centers are closed due to distancing requirements. Building renovations, here we have proposed making some renovations to the building for record storage, moving our records from the basement. That project has been eliminated, saving $3,000. EMA supplies, which included new radios for emergency management, that's been eliminated. Building equipment has been eliminated with $1,000 savings there. Snowplow operators, we had a mild winter, so we were able to trim $2,500 from the snow removal operators budget. And our Fountain Festival is going to be only a one-day event. We're going to cut down on our cost of our Fountain Festival by $1,000. These budget cuts will result in a savings to the borough of $84,200. I'm recommending that you adopt these adjustments for a number of reasons. Number one, on the revenue side, I think we're going to have to show some documentation in order to qualify for federal funds later in the year. And these funds will be tied to loss of revenue. We have to show something in our budget and officially from the borough that we're going to be experiencing these revenue reductions. So these adjustments allow for that. And I'm recommending that the Borough Council adopt these adjustments at the next regular meeting as a first step. We might have to take other steps. And I just want to, and I want to be an alarmist, but I want to be frank with everyone. And I don't think anyone here tonight isn't cognizant of the fact that this virus is impacting people. They're not working. Unemployment benefits do not provide for the payment of earned income taxes. We're seeing this on our water and sewer side. You know, our second largest customer is the Big Spring School District, and revenues are down because the school buildings are closed. So when you look at this, there are many factors to the virus that impact us. And for us just to sit back and say, well, you know, that's the way it is, I don't think is being responsible. And I think we have to take some measures to protect our borough to ensure that we will get through this year financially. So does anyone have any questions regarding those adjustments in our revenues and expenses?
I think this is very proactive.
What we are going to do is, and you're going to hear this throughout the year, is essential spending only. And our council president and I talk maybe 3-4 times a week. We talk about the revenues that are coming in, we talk about spending, and we have talked to our employees and our department heads, and they're doing a good job at keeping the costs down. But my concern is, and you're going to have a little discussion here later on, I would like to see us purchase some certificates of deposit to set aside our tax monies so that they would be available to us when we need them. After August, September, October, November are bad months financially. They're going to be even worse this year if things don't change. And again, I don't want to be an alarmist, but I don't want to be here in October telling you we have no money to make payroll, we have no money to make pay our bills. I want to have a plan in place so that we can respond to that, and that we can respond to this downturn in revenues by cutting non-essential spending through the rest of the year.
Any other questions?
Any impact on personnel?
At this point, no, but I will tell you that Mr. Crouch and I will be having a meeting coming up, and we will have a plan for layoffs. We have to. We have to plan for every eventuality here, because this we don't know where we're going to be really in 60 days. I don't think any of us sitting here tonight can say that's going to be better or worse, but we have to plan for it. And we have to make some plans, and they have to be in writing, and they have to be shared with all of you at upcoming meetings. I hope we don't have to do it. I hope we plan for the worst and we get the best. But we have to do this as leaders of the community. Take these steps, as unpleasant as they may be. Right now, to answer the question, there are no reduction in hours. There are no reduction in staff, but I'm not ruling out that that won't become a likelihood later in this year, maybe even as early as June or July.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? So we can handle this at the meeting at the end of the month as well?
Yes,
That's still timely enough?
yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right. Do you want to talk about the changes in number 3 that we made to the office?
Yes, the Pennsylvania Department of Health issued some new regulations that have to do with in-person customer service. And you have those regulations in your meeting packet. What I've done here is, and I've sent you all a memo about a week ago regarding some low-cost modifications to our borough office so that we can bring residents back in and at least deal with them more personably than through a Dropbox or a mailbox or email. And so what we've done is we modified our borough office door, and we will make that into a customer service window. You can enter the building, come in as far as the foyer, transact your business. We've got a display outside the door with forms that can be completed. If you need additional forms or assistance, the ladies in the office will help with that. You can pay your water and sewer bill, you can pay your taxes. The only thing is we request just one person in the foyer at a time, but at least it reopens our building partially to people who can come in, have a conversation with us. The same thing at the manager's office. They can come upstairs. We're going to modify the door into a Dutch door. The distance between folks coming in to talk to me and my desk is over 20 feet. So it's a perfect safety zone. We'll wear masks and take all precautions, but we're trying to move so that people could come back in and have some interaction with their government and still meet the requirements of the Pennsylvania Department of Health and the CDC. These modifications, I should add, have cost the borough less than $350.
Questions? I've shared with Fred, even when this is all said and done, the modification to the door, with the pass through and stuff like that, for somebody who thinks about security an awful lot, at a school, that's a great thing for us to have for security for, the office staff as well. So, I can see that moving forward is just something that can benefit us.
The next item is for informational purposes, and I'm not aware of any large-scale construction projects in the borough. It will affect residents who are making improvements to their home, maybe having a roof put on or a bathroom renovated. But there are now guidelines for the construction industry that have been set forth by the Department of Health. One of these guidelines we've adopted at the water and sewer level, and that is if you're requiring our engineer to inspect a project, and we have a project coming up over at the Penn Commerce Center where we will be making inspections of water and sewer main extensions. We have asked the contractor, and they have furnished a certification to us. And the certification states that they've received a waiver from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and that they have the ability to operate and do the construction work in accordance with the laws and guidelines of the Commonwealth. And what that does, it relieves us of responsibility should someone not have those authorizations. They're basically making a sworn statement to the borough and the authority that they do have the permission, that they have the permits, and that we can move forward and make the inspection safely. So those are the only two things, and they're just informational items. We don't have to vote on those because basically they are state guidelines. I'm just bringing them to your attention. And that's all that I have, unless Mike, you have anything under administration.
I do not.
Fred, you want to talk about the CDs right now?
Yes, we have done a lot of business with the Mid-Penn Bank, Evan Dickinson at Mid-Penn Bank. And we contacted Mid-Penn for some help on setting aside money for the second half of 2020. And they're offering a CD, a 90-day CD with a rate of 0.4%. And we're thinking of maybe doing two CDs, one for 50,000 for 90 days, and then waiting and doing another one for 25,000 for 90 days. If we can, we would set aside more. But this is something that we would like to do and have the money. It will be accounted for on your treasurer's reports. The only people that can sign to open the CDs and to redeem them will be council members. And it's just a measure so that we would have money set aside to get our borough through the latter half of 2020.
Fred, is there any kind of penalty if we have to cash one or both in early?
Oh, I would imagine so, yes. But I haven't seen I haven't seen the documents yet. So when I do get them, I'll share them with you.
Good, because I might suggest to Evan that due to the crisis, maybe they would waive any penalty. It's possible.
So the question is, does council wish to purchase CDs and set aside tax money for the second half of 2020?
It sounds like a good idea to me to have a cushion and some money set aside so that it's, so it's not viewed as available for any expense that comes along and we find ourselves late in the year not having the money to pay our bills. So
Thank you. That's right. Very good.
Do you want action on this, or can we do it at the end of the meeting, end of the month?
We can do it at the end of the month. In the meantime, I'll gather the documents because you're going to have to pass a resolution and you're all going to have to sign and we'll have to have a check drafted. So I would say at the end of the month would be fine.
Joey, you had a question?
No, I just said it sounds like a good idea.
All right, very good. Economic development, Jack, got anything?
Yeah, just quickly, this past week, we onboarded our consultants for the EDA. We had a meeting, Scott, Fred, Joey, and I, with our consultants, Marcus, Tim Cormany, who'll be the engineer for the project for the EDA, and Chris Galata, who's going to be the project manager. And the agenda for the meeting was to prepare for the organization meeting of the EDA, which will include, election, housekeeping stuff, election of officers, scheduling, et cetera. Also to talk about the initial business meeting, which we think should happen the same day. And we're going to try to get that done quickly. The focus, the discussion we had with the staff was in the context of the crisis that we're facing. How does the EDA best use its resources and its focus as we move forward with a priority being on recovering from the crisis that we're in. So we think that the best approach to this would be to focus the initial activities on strategy and projects that would help the local recovery. They would be economic development projects, but they would also be aimed very specifically in some instances at local recovery, particularly our businesses here. So there are basically sort of two prongs to this. One is we're starting outreach. Chris put together a survey for us to use in contacting the small businesses in Newville to determine what the effect of the shutdown has been on their business, what efforts they're making to secure funding, because there's a lot of state and federal funding out there if you know where to find it, and what the result of that has been, and whether there are things that we can help them with. So we're going to be doing that starting this week. That's in process now. We've just gotten the survey back from Chris, and Fred and Lindsay are putting together the list of businesses for us to contact. And the second is to focus on shovel-ready projects that would help Newville to apply for available state and federal recovery funds. Fred has for a long time putting together projects that would make sense for the Economic Development Authority to take on. We had a discussion about some of those projects at our meeting, identified a few that would be ready to go, that would fit within the rubric of recovery, and where state or federal funds might be available to help support a lot of that. So we're in the process now. Chris is going through, and I think Tim Cormany is going to be doing this as well, looking at the cost of these various projects, what the potential funding sources are, and what actions we would need to take. And then we have another meeting this Friday with the same group to talk about where we stand and to make plans for next steps. One of the things Chris is looking at is, in addition to trying to find, in addition to public funding, and also in addition to banking financing, which is going to be sketchy, especially for small businesses, are alternatives to financing for small businesses, things like crowdfunding operations. He has a whole list of ideas and organizations that have been very successful in helping small businesses get on their feet without the usual strings attached to federal, state money or banks. And that may be something that turns out to be essential for some of these businesses as they move forward. So that's pretty much it. Fred, unless you or Joey or Scott or Marcus want to say anything else that I may have missed, or?
Just to add to that, Jack, Tim Cormany and Jack and I are getting together tomorrow at 9. Going to walk around town, look at 4 or 5 projects, and start working on revised cost estimates for those projects. We're meeting here at the office at 9 o'clock. We'll maintain social distancing if people see us out around town. We're just looking at projects, developing estimates, as Jack said, for shovel-ready projects.
Anything else?
Not for me.
All right, very good. Parks and Rec. Ed,
Yeah, well, I really didn't get a lot of information. We discussed a request from DMC Softball League to begin using the softball field at the community park. And I haven't heard anything about that, Scott, so maybe I haven't seen anything on that.
I just think we saw an email that was requesting, but there was no specific date, if I recall. It was kind of very general in the request. I mean, my opinion is right now, social distancing is 10 people. Well, you can't play softball with 10 people.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know how we can open that up until we at least get into the yellow phase.
Oh, I totally
don't
agree.
know.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the borough park, so we can't.
Yeah.
I will speak to my experiences the last couple days. I was working in the garden, and I think it was Friday, had noticed a young man sitting in the gazebo. I walked over, introduced myself, advised him that the park was still closed. He apologized and left, no problem at all. Sunday, had a young lad playing basketball on the court. Stopped and talked to him and requested that he leave. And he said that he didn't realize that it was closed, even though there's one of those big white signs right in front of the entrance gate to the ball court. He was very polite and he left. And then later, I found that young man and another young man and that other young man's sister and that other young man's father. So I stopped again, introduced myself again, and requested that they leave. The park isn't open. The park is owned by the borough, and right now it's closed. In the end, they left. I did have to listen to a sermon from a 14-year-old that it was a violation of his constitutional rights to make him leave a park that was closed. However, in the end, they left. What we have to avoid is giving the softball league permission to use the field when we are starting to experience problems with
Compliance.
of that nature at the park, which is still closed. And it's not, it would just be counterproductive to everything we've tried to do. And they have been working on the field. Kevin Yost looks really nice. We can't do it.
Randy, I spoke to Kevin about that, and he knows. He's just trying to get some feelings because other people contacted him. Everybody's anxious to utilize that field now because it looks so good. Yeah, but he understands that. So
Good.
he's just trying to respond to the questionnaires he gets from other people. So I agree with you on that.
Is there something we can do about the basketball courts? You know, like my impression of the park being closed, people can still walk through it. It's still, you know, they can still, if they're out walking their dog, that's no different than going to the trail. But, you know, when you're playing, you know, shirts and skins on the basketball court with 5 or 6 other people, that's not social distancing.
It is the first time, because I know the officers are checking the video from the park cameras. It's the first time we've had a problem. Although with the warmer weather, I instructed the officers to continue to monitor that. But if we don't address it, then someday there will be, you know, numerous people in the park, even though it's still closed. And I don't like it any more than they do. But as you know, the local government, we're not right now in a position to pick and choose what we're allowed to enforce and what we just leave go.
My concern is that as time goes, the pressures to use these facilities by parents who are overworked with homeschooling and kids who are anxious to get out and do something is only going to become worse. And until we're in a position to test and disinfect the park, we really can't permit it.
So, and up on the hill at the elementary school, which their playground area technically has not been closed, there are 3 basketball hoops up there. And I pointed that out. You want to shoot hoops? There's your place. But you can't do it here.
Actually, those facilities are to be closed as well, I believe. So, can we lock the gates to the basketball court?
You can, sure.
You can. I spoke to Fred about that. I sort of am falling on the side of trusting the majority of the people in the community to have good judgment and know that they're not supposed to be there. Locking the gates might sort of indicate we're being heavy-handed about it. At this point, I mean, that's an option if it continues, but I just asked the police when they're out around town to have those park cameras up on their in-car laptop and just handle it that way.
Okay.
Rather than start putting up police tape and locking gates and stuff like that.
I sort of go back to what Marcus said, you know, the pressure is going to become greater and greater. And through the process of attrition, we're going to wind up violating the standards that we know have to be kept. You know, you can't your police can't be there all the time. And 1s and 2s are going to start drifting in, and they're going to see, other people are going to see them and they'll start drifting in. And that's how we lose the battle. So I think
in speaking to Fred, I know he contacted some of the Carlisle. They handled the problem by removing the hoops from their basketball court and taking down the tennis court nets.
yeah, I think some sort of visible symbol of the fact that we're serious is not a bad idea.
Right. And, you know, up to this point, we've not had to do any of that because people were respecting the fact that it was closed.
Right. Yeah, but I think Marcus is right. It's as the spring wears on, it's just going to be, the pressure is going to be really strong. And unless you want your officers, you know, in confrontations with people all the time, moving them off the courts, it may be good to, you know, make a symbolic gesture and close it.
Okay.
So they have to be more serious.
You mean as far as locking the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
Well,
think.
I also instructed them, first time it's a warning, you know, we're not going to go right in and start writing citations, that the people should be warned. You take the time to talk to them, try and reason with them. And, you know, if you find them there a second time, then, you know, you take the action.
Well, that certainly makes sense.
There's a companion issue that I think we should raise, and if Mr. President, you think it's inappropriate right now to do it, we can do it. But I'm concerned about whether or not our police officers are going to be enforcing social distancing among the population, generally speaking.
I mean, we can take it up now. I think that's a nightmare. I mean, unless the police officers know who's living with who and that kind of stuff, you know, that's a little tough.
What do we
Right,
mean?
right now, I don't think we have any, I know how businesses that are still open in town are operating, and it's not an issue at any one of them.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of.
What do we
But-
mean by enforcing social distance? Marcus?
Well, there are various cities in which officers have tried to do that, and it really got out of hand quickly. My thought would be that we stay out of the enforcement, that we not use our officers to do that kind of enforcement unless we have another discussion about it.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that, Mayor?
I agree. I don't want, right now, I've heard a lot of positive comments about the police department and how they've reacted. And so at this point, we still have the goodwill of the citizens, and I don't want to lose that. You know, they all know if it's obviously something someone just should not be doing, they can address that. But to just be the social distancing patrol, I'm not so much in favor of that.
Yeah, living on Big Spring Avenue, I've seen more and more people out walking as families and stuff, which is really good. You have to get out, and the streets are really being utilized quite heavily by walkers and families, which I think is good.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't know how you can keep families socially distanced, but it's good to see.
Yeah.
Good to see.
Again, we need to be ruled by common sense.
Sure.
And it seems to me if people are behaving respectfully and just walking or getting exercise, that should be encouraged and not discouraged.
Oh, definitely. I agree with you.
Is there any reason, Randy, that the officers, if they see what is obviously a group of people together who are, you know, it's not a family, it's a bunch of kids playing basketball, to remind them of this?
Perhaps a gentle reminder.
Right, no threat.
But if they get a negative response, to just leave it pass.
Yeah, so don't set it up as a command, and then you don't have to worry about your command being
Exactly.
ignored, and then that means you then need to do something about it, right? To take control.
Right.
So don't make it that. Just, hey, be aware that you're not supposed to be congregating, and then walk away.
Yeah.
I really haven't seen that at all. No,
I haven't, I've seen very, very little.
no.
Yeah, well, and that's good.
Yeah.
I think it's just thinking forward, and back to again what Marcus said is I think the spring and the summer are really going to bring people out with an
Yes.
urge to do things and to
Yes.
do things together. And I think we're gonna revisit this many times, I'm sure, about how we do this in the right way. But I think we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people healthy. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
So,
Just
Mayor,
by like a trail. The rails of trails being heavily used now.
Oh, this past weekend, it was jammed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I see them all from my front porch.
Yes. And that's the only outlet people have here in town. So,
Yeah. Well, they're using it.
yeah.
Mayor, I suggest you talk to the chief about contingency plans in this area because the pressure is going to become greater. And I just want to make sure that he understands where council's coming from and where you're coming from about not getting involved in or letting them become politicized about whether or not they believe in the virus or they don't believe in it. I think it's important that that their job is to be peacemakers and not enforcers of social distancing.
Right. I don't want the department to lose the goodwill that they enjoy out in the community right now. Fine line between heavy-handedness and being reasonable with people.
All right. Item number 2, Ed, certification of general rec to complete park improvements. Fred, did that certification finally come in?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a done deal. We're just waiting on the company to be able to get the work, right?
They're going to submit a invoice for one half of the contract. We'll send it down to the redevelopment authority, get them paid, and the big problem right now is finding those replacement parts for the existing equipment. Steve Hemler from General Recreation is working on getting us those parts. As soon as he has those, I think he'll have a date for you as to when he will start.
Okay, very
But
good.
will they be able to do that during this downtime?
Yes, that's what we're hoping for, to have it done so that when we reopen, we can make
Good,
everything, because nothing's going to be more appealing than that new play service and then telling kids stay off at that.
definitely, yeah.
We're hoping that doesn't
Maybe
happen.
we could have a grand reopening of the park.
That sounds like a
Good idea.
Another thing to add to that, Nicholas Spielman, who is Boy Scout working on the Eagle Scout project. I talked to you probably 6 months ago about a Gaga pit. He is still interested in doing that. At some point, he has to present it to us. I think that's part of his Eagle Scout. So I told him that if he wanted to present it at the end of the month, we can find time for him to do that, whether it's through Zoom. If he has to do it in person, then, that'll have to be whenever it has to be. But I know he is he technologically he can do it because all of his classes right now are doing it this way. So I know that he would be able to hop on and present to us if needed. So just look for that to still come along. I just wanted to update you. He was still interested in that. Let's real quick talk about parades. Fred and I have talked a bit about the Memorial Day parade. It sounds like the Joint Veterans Council is planning on canceling the parade. That pretty much is their call, and we're going to support that call. Fred and I have worked on some things that we can do to still honor the day, but not necessarily it won't be with a parade or anything like that. But we've talked about a 21 gun salute that can be heard throughout town, taps that could be played throughout town at a certain time. So we're working on that. I guess once we hear a definite yes, the parade's canceled, we will share that information with. Bless you. We'll share that information with the community. But I think, Fred, wouldn't you say you're probably 99% sure that it's canceled?
Yeah, it appears they're going to have a recorded ceremony from the American Legion. According to Pat Reed, they're just going to have a service at the American Legion with only 10 members present. Again, just to honor the fallen veterans.
Yeah. Item number 2 with that. So with graduation and the end of the school year being a complete wash, basically, one of the proposals brought to us was to do a commencement caravan, and we'll come to you probably at the end of the month here to get permission to do this. But just in general, so you have an idea, we would look at the teachers and staff would have a staging location where the seniors would bring their cars, have them decorated. Those teachers would be responsible for maintaining social distance with the kids. I'm completely comfortable with it. The kids are going to do what they need to do with the correct supervision. From that staging area, we would then roll and keep a constantly moving caravan of seniors on a route from that location to the high school. And we've talked about setting up some announcement stations throughout the route where they would read each person's name. Kids would only be allowed one person per vehicle. It's not like you're not getting 16 kids in a car, nothing like that. One kid per vehicle unless it's their parent. So, or a parent or a sibling could be the driver and the graduate in the other seat. They're providing their own vehicles. We're not providing vehicles for them, that kind of stuff. So that request will probably come at the end of the month. I think their goal is to do this the night of when graduation was supposed to be, which is June 5th. And, so that's where it's at. The estimations that we're hearing will probably be in yellow by the end of the month. Questions, comments on those?
Well, I think it's nice that we want to do something like that, but I have a question. Are they not going to get the final tap of the bulldog?
So we have, that's a really good question.
Well, it's tradition.
I don't want to share too much information because the seniors don't have this information yet, but I can tell you that we are working on ways to make sure that they get as much of a traditional graduation as possible. And that's what we've heard from the kids. They want it down in the stadium. They want to tap the bulldog. They want to walk across the stage. We're doing everything we can to allow that to happen, within whatever the regulations are at that time. It will not happen on June 5th. It will happen later in the summer if that is able to happen at all. But we are working on it. But I can't share too much just because, like I said, that message hasn't gone out to the seniors.
Right.
Not that we have many seniors that are sitting here watching this meeting right now, but.
Well, we've been called seniors at times.
That's true.
True.
All right, anything else, Ed?
That's it, I have, yep. That's all.
Anything, it looks like Bob is muted. I'm not sure if he has anything for public safety or not. If he does, he can unmute and come back. Quality life, Joey?
Go ahead.
Okay, we do have the community signs for sale, the ones that have the fountain on it, and it says Newville Together. They are $10 each. It cost us $4 to have them made, and the other $6 is going to go to Neighbors in Christ, who definitely needs the funds right now. And you can get them by calling the borough office, and they will make arrangements for you to pick them up and pay for them. And then the other thing, Scott, you said was barking dogs.
Yeah, so just as a heads up, there's been a number of complaints, I guess, maybe not officially through the borough office, but I've had a couple. I know Fred's had a couple. And we're not talking about the occasional, dog barks kind of thing. We're talking about all day long barking of certain dogs. Just so we're all on the same page, there is an ordinance for this. The process that we should take, I would say, if somebody comes to us and we want to address it, that we contact the mayor and let the mayor work through the police department, so that way they can issue that warning and citation if necessary. If it's a citizen who wants to take care of the issue themselves, then that I would suggest that they then just call the police department. They would be the ones responsible to handle it. But
Okay. All
Well,
right.
There's something being done. I mean, those dogs just go on.
yeah, that's the process, and
So we have to call the police department? Is that the idea?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
And because we do have a barking dog ordinance, and like I said, me personally, I'm a dog lover. I've had a dog my whole life. You occasionally hear my dog barking. That's what dogs do. But we know that there are certain dogs that are outside all day long, and they do nothing but bark all day long. I physically, that happened last Sunday.
Yeah.
All day long, the dog barked.
Is this a relatively new problem? Because I don't remember it past the last month back or so.
I don't recall it being a big problem in years past. Maybe Fred knows more about the history of it, but it's never been an issue before, since I've been in town.
Not to the extent that we're having it this year.
So there is an ordinance about it and something can be done if there are enough complaints. Is that the point?
Well, as Scott said, contact the police department, contact the mayor. Going to need an address and location for the officers to go and serve the copy of the notice of the ordinance and to, take action against the property owner. But there is a procedure in place for it.
Usually, when the complaint's received, the officer will go to the address, speak to the resident about the complaint, give them a copy of the ordinance. So they, have a copy they can refer to. And that's the initial contact. And then if it continues, then it moves on towards the enforcement end of
I
it.
see. Has any of that happened yet?
I'm not aware of anything that has happened recently, but I know that's how the situation is handled when it does arise.
Because I've gone over there a couple of times to try to find where these dogs are, and for some reason, when I get over there, they shut up. I don't know. I've done this.
Do you know where Chestnut Street is?
Huh?
Do you know where Chestnut Street is?
Yes.
Go to Chestnut Street.
Okay. All right. I thought it was further over. I thought it was on Vine, but I guess.
I think you're right, Jack.
Okay. So there's no address that everybody knows at this point that somebody can tell me so I can go do this.
I don't think it's appropriate to do that here anyway.
Okay.
All right, anything else, Joey?
Well, it's not borough related, but there's going to be a chicken barbecue to support Paul's Pack and the Big Spring Area Food Bank. Paul's Pack is the one who's sponsoring it, but it's going to be on May 16th at South Fairview First Church of God. And it starts at 11 and it'll go till it's sold out. It's $9. It's a half a chicken, baked beans, applesauce, and a roll. And like I said, the proceeds is going to go to Paul's Pack and the Big Spring Food Bank.
Very
So
good.
get that out. That would be great to help them. And it doesn't say that you have to pre-order them. So.
All right. And back to those yard signs real quick. Half of them are sold. So there's
Also, we have what, about 50 left?
Yep, there's about 50 left.
Okay.
Future agenda items, discussion about this meeting format. Let's have it right now. What are your feelings of how we've been doing this, remotely versus face to face?
We have no choice, do we? Scott, we have no choice, do we?
I guess we have a choice.
Not to have it or have it.
I don't know whether the choice is a good one, but I guess we do have a choice. I think Fred, if I'm right, I believe a neighboring council recently held a meeting. Once the 10th person was in the door, they locked the door, and anybody outside who had a question had to fill it out on paper and somehow submit it through the door or something like that. But they couldn't be there to see and ask questions or anything like that in person. I know we've discussed possibly having it at the garage, which would give us more space. My personal concern is we have it at the garage, and we're kind of taking a risk with the people we're trying to protect the most, which would be our water treatment facilities workers. And if we're a town that doesn't have water and sewer, we're in a world of trouble. You know, you could do the pavilion if it's nice out, but then again, that's if it's nice out. But then again, if the park's closed, why would we be having a meeting at the park?
Well,
I
the other
just don't
issue-
think there's any good options, is what I'm trying to say.
As long as we're still restricted to 10, if we had a in-person meeting, that would include Lindsay to be there to take the minutes, and that's 10.
Right.
So you couldn't even have one citizen in there. Because there's 9 of us, if we all attended, and Lindsay would make 10.
Anybody else?
I agree. Ideally, it is nice to do it in person, but until we get the minimum of 10 or the maximum of 10, this is our best option. People can still comment through YouTube. They can submit questions if they have any. And if they attend this meeting, then they know what's going to be discussed at the end of the month also. And they can put in questions ahead of time for that. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I think we should keep in mind that 10 is an arbitrary limit.
Mhm.
And anytime you're bringing people together under these conditions, you're creating a risk.
Right.
I think it's worth noting that on May 8th, 24 counties are going to yellow, and we're not one of them. And the reason for that is because our rate of infection is too high. What were the other things? The ability to distance is another criteria. So what we're being told is, we're a county that still is not able to move to the next step. So I think that suggests that we should be particularly careful about the circumstances under which we bring people together. And if there are alternatives to getting the same effect, to getting the same outcome, that's what we ought to be doing. So long-winded way of saying, I think we're good doing what we're doing.
Anybody else?
Well, there's nothing more I would like than to have an in-person person meeting. However, I'll speak for myself. There's only one person on this screen who is older than me, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
But he's not that much older than me. However, so for someone in my age range, the top 3 underlying conditions that could make this virus serious for me, I have all 3 of them. And I have a 94-year-old mother to protect. So only I will decide when I'm going to come to an in-person meeting. And I don't feel comfortable with it right now.
So I think this is a good format right here. I think it's a good format.
I mean,
Well,
we're having really good discussions here on everything that was on the agenda tonight. It's not like we're shorting the discussions just to be done with it, where we're actually spending a good bit of time.
I'm more tired tonight than when I am during an in-person meeting.
I would simply say, for the benefit of all of us, that again, in the abundance of caution, we have to look towards the weakest citizens in our town and set an example. We can't be critical of people who are using the park if we aren't doing all we can to be safe ourselves and create public input in a safe way until things markedly change one way or another. And so I think we have to err on the side of being safe. And I will tell you that from my contacts, the first line of defense is to have no infections in a nursing home. Once the first infection occurs, it's like wildfire. And in our state and other states around us, the number one series of deaths come from senior citizens who've been in close proximity with other infected senior citizens. And we know that younger people can be carriers. So I know that the nursing home where my father resides has strict testing every day of all employees. And until we can test every citizen coming to our meetings and test each other, I think it's premature to talk about in face-to-face meetings until we have that ability to be able to say, well, you can't attend the meeting because of your condition based on testing. And we don't have that capability right now. And until we have it, I think we're in the abundance of caution, like it or not, and we can work on our pledge. I mean, we can work on that, but like it or not, I think, Scott, you've done a wonderful job at organizing things and keeping things moving.
Here,
Second that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
Hey, I just like to compliment Fred and his maintenance crew for just keep on going. I always hear good vibes about people seeing them work all the time. So it's nice to see. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, Ed. The one last thing I wanted to mention, the men have gone out and posted streets for no parking. We are not issuing tickets, but we're asking people to move their cars Wednesday and Thursday so we could do some little bit better sweeping of the streets. And the signs have gone up, but we're not issuing tickets or anything like that.
Very good. The only other thing I had for a future agenda item, we do need to elect a president pro tem. We probably should do that at the May meeting as well, or at the meeting at the end of the month.
Scott, can I give a quick update on Jason Brady?
Yes.
And it's actually good news. Under normal conditions, without the academy shutting down, Jason would have graduated at the end of June. Then he would have done the 60 days worth of ride-alongs. That's part of our training program at the station. And because he had graduated, those ride-alongs he would have been paid for those ride-alongs at his regular police pay. When the academy shut down the in-class sessions, we brought him in to do his ride-alongs then, and those were paid for at cadet pay, which was a good savings for us. Now, happy to announce that at the end of last week, the academy went to online classes. So now he is now in the process of completing his coursework. Prior to shutting down, the academy, not knowing how long this would go on, they had weapons qualification, they had the physical agility test, both of which he completed successfully. So when the online classes are done, probably the same time frame, the end of June, he's finished. But the advantage is he's already done his 60 days worth of ride-alongs. So when he completes the academy coursework, he's in a patrol car and out there on his own right away.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic.
And frankly, if we're ever in a position to have to send someone else to the academy, I think that we should do the same thing. We should have them come in on weekends and do their ride-alongs while they're going to the academy. And then when they graduate, they're ready. And it's an additional cost saving because they're getting paid a cadet rate to do that.
Right.
And one more thing, as a result of the briefing we had today from FEMA, the extra police patrols, Jason's time will be 100% reimbursed by FEMA when we make our application. So all these ride-alongs that he's been doing, he's been augmenting our police patrols, and we will be able to recover 100% of his salary and benefits.
Very good news.
Yeah. Randy, I do have one question. With all this that's been going on, what about the dog? I know the dog comes from overseas.
That's what we're waiting to hear.
Okay.
Dog was coming from the Netherlands, which
Mhm.
had a pretty significant outbreak.
Right.
And, we're just waiting to hear when they're going to be able
Okay.
to ship over here. That's where we are.
Okay.
Dogs paid for. We're just waiting
Right.
for it to go up.
Right.
Randy, any time for the chief coming back? Is there a time on that yet?
The last time I talked to him, well, the last time I saw him, he was off his crutches, but he had it was two separate operations on his foot. One was just orthoscopic.
Mhm.
The other half of it, they laid his foot open from end to end and had to go in there and do the work and then, suturing back up. And that, type of work takes a lot longer to
Sure.
recover.
Yep.
But he is in communication with me weekly and I get emails from him and occasionally we talk on the phone.
Good.
So, he's not incapacitated, but there's a difference between not being incapacitated and getting clearance from your doctor to come back to full police duty.
Sure. Well, I understand. Thank you.
Very good. Anything else? All right, last final check on YouTube. There's no questions, no comments, so we're good to go there. Anything else? Otherwise, we're good to adjourn.
Sounds good. Make a motion.
All right.
Second.
You guys are quick on it today.
Practice that pledge of allegiance.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much for all your hard work and during this. It's been interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But we'll get through it and we'll come out the other side better than what we went in. So
Yeah, thanks for your strong leadership. Yeah.
thank you. All right, everybody stay well and I'll hopefully see you sometime soon.
Alrighty, take care.
All
Good
right.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.